Jesus, in chapter 12 of Luke, has been teaching. He comes to this place where he's teaching about the Holy Spirit and how important he is and critical he is for time and eternity. His teaching is interrupted by one of the listeners, one of the persons who was there listening to the sermon. He blurts out in the middle of the message. Someone, verse 13 says, in the crowd said to him, a listener to his teaching, "Teacher," because he's been teaching, "tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." There was a family conflict about their daddy's will. Daddy had died, and there was a battle between these two brothers as to who would get the money. This listener, not wanting to go to a Gentile court, Jesus being a Jewish rabbi, wanted Jesus to resolve their financial family conflict based on Jewish law, not secular Roman civil courts. And so he asked the rabbi, the teacher, to enter into this family dispute. And the family dispute was about the will, the inheritance. That would naturally involve money. It would naturally involve household items, maybe who would get the house. So it was either money or the things that money could buy. When he asked Jesus this question of intervening, Jesus has a curious response. He says in verse 13, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter over you?" Now, you need to know that the word "you" at the end of verse 14 is plural. You can be singular, you can be plural. It's plural. So Jesus is saying, who made me arbiter over y'all? If he was speaking Texan. So the brother is there. The brother that the brother is talking about is there because he's talking to both of them. Y'all want me to fix this money problem, this inheritance problem, these possession issues between the two of you. Why does Jesus respond to the man's request that way? Jesus was speaking about spiritual stuff. The man interrupts it with financial stuff, possession stuff. It's as though the man was saying, okay, all that heaven stuff is nice, but I got to live right down here. And my brother got my money, and my money is funny. And so I need you to fix my earthly situation. I got that heaven stuff, but this ain't Sunday. This is Monday. Fix my real world dilemma. Me and my brother are fighting over this money. So Jesus responds by telling him, if you invite me into your family dispute about your will, your daddy's will, then you have to understand that when the teacher, me, gets into your family discussion, I'm not going to limit my answer to merely your earthly dilemma. My answer has got to deal with the root and not mainly the question of the fruit. You asked me about arbitrating the conflict between you and your brother, but there's actually something deeper going on. So I not only want to deal with what you asked, I want to deal with the motive that made you ask me about it. See, that's why a lot of folk don't want Jesus. Because they just want to hang out with the fruit and not get to the root. So Jesus now takes the conversation deeper than the question because he knew the heart that was behind the question. And in taking it deeper, it leads him to verse 15. Then he said to them, Beware, watch out, and be on guard for every form of greed. For not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions. Oh, Jesus, you didn't take in the man's simple question and turned it into something else. No, I've turned it into what motivated him to ask me about it. See, because that's the problem with Jesus. He's going to deal with your motives and not just with your information. It's like when you're talking to somebody and you say to them, well, what are you really asking me? He says, watch out for every form greed takes. For every form of greed. Greed in biblical terms has to deal with whether you have placed the physical ahead of the spiritual. So it can take personal forms where your pursuit of your career, your pursuit of your financial security, your pursuit of your reputation, your pursuit of your economic gain can push God out, and that's a form of greed. When your promotion in this world order pushes God to the sideline and the spiritual to the back of the room, you've now become greedy even if you haven't arrived there yet. Beware, he says. Look at how many couples, because greed has many forms. It has a family form. Look at how many couples divorce over money or fight over it. They battle, they go to war because this selfishness gets in the form of possessions and money. Debt accumulates because contentment is lost and it becomes a form of greed that intervenes and interferes with the harmony in the home. He says, beware. And there's some simple ways to know if you're greedy. If you're spending more time complaining than giving thanks, you're on the road to greedy if you're not there yet. If you're always talking about what you don't have and don't ever see what God has done, because that speaks of another proof, and that other proof is discontentment. Paul says, I've learned that whatever state I'm in, to be content, to be at ease where I am until God grants me more. It's not wrong to want to do better, to want to have more, but to be discontent is an indicator. To accumulate debt so that you have to rob God is a form of greed. He says, watch out for every form of greed. Why? He says at the end of verse 15, because even when one has an abundance, more than enough, his life, not even when one has more than enough, does his life consist of his possessions. Now, what's this got to do with an eternal perspective? Well, Jesus begins and says, well, let me tell you a story. He gives a parable, beginning in verse 16. He says, I want to tell you a story. He told them a parable, verse 16. The land of a rich man was very productive. So let's just stop there. We've got an entrepreneur. He is very, very successful. He's what every person dreams to be, productive in his life, and he was very productive. So this is the guy who worked hard, who took care of his business, and it was working out for him. Verse 17 tells us a little bit more about him. And he began reasoning to himself, saying, what should I do, since I have no place to store my crops? This is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. If you read this story, you will see him referring to himself 14 times. I, me, my, you. He keeps talking about himself. He says, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to plan this, and I'm going to plan that. And where you going with all this, mister? He said, and when I get all this stuff where I want it to be, he says, then I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years to come. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. It's time to retire. Now, I know I'm talking to folks, many who have retirement in mind. You can't wait to eat, drink, and be merry, to not have to go to that job. You got the 401k, you've got the savings accounts, you've got the various retirement tools, and you are planning for that day when nobody's owning your 9 to 5. So you are seeking to be as productive as you can now in light of that time that you can retire. That was this man's dream. And he spent all of his working time to make that dream of retirement occur. Is that a problem? Is Jesus downing, planning for the future? No. Let me tell you what he's doing. Jesus says, but God said to him, you fool. You fool. You didn't hear me. You fool. What's the problem? This very night your soul is required of you, and now who will own what you have prepared? Here's our problem with our productive entrepreneur. He had a major miscalculation. He was assuming something. He was assuming he was going to get to retire. He was assuming he was going to make it to Social Security. He was assuming eat, drink, and be merry. It was all about his party in time. He was doing what many people do today. Put off God till I have time. Put off God till I don't have to work. Put off ministry to others until I can get around to it. Right now, I got a bill for my future. But he ran into two words. Two words that can reverse for good or for evil any scenario at any time. But God. See, you can't leave those two words out of your equation because those two words can totally reverse your situation for good or for bad. But God. When you leave God and the eternal perspective out of your plans, it's not wrong to have your plans. It's not wrong to be productive with your plans. He does not condemn the fact that this guy was working hard and wanted to enjoy the fruits of his labor. God's concern is he wanted to do all of that without divine consideration. He wanted to do that independently of God. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 to 16 talks about those who are rich, those who wanted to be rich. And he says the love of money is the root of all evil. Not money, but the love of it. Why? Because you put it before God. He says if God gives it to you, he gives it to you to enjoy, but he expects you not to lose him in the process of gaining it and not to forget others in the process of using it. That's why he says in that chapter, be rich in good works. Let me put it this way. The more you're blessed, the more generous you should be, and the more helpful you should become for the benefit of others. Because there is an eternity around the corner. But God told him. God intervened. Isaiah 22, verses 12 to 14, and in verse 56, verse 12, he says, you say, eat, drink, and be merry, and you forget God. You plan your future out, and you are a fool, he says. The scripture makes it clear, it is appointed unto man once to die, and after that the judgment. Death is not a period, it is a conjunction. You transition. You leave this earth by appointment. This guy made it. But what he forgot along the way was that everything he was using to make it depended on God. We've got some business folk here, or business folk wannabes. Entrepreneur wannabes, okay? So God has a special passage for you. It's in James chapter 4, verses 13 and 16. He says, you businessmen, you say, we're going to this city and that city to cut a deal and make a profit. That's what you say. That's what you say. He says, but what you ought to say is, if it's the Lord's will, we're going to go to this city and that city and make a profit. Because you leave God out of even the planning of cutting the deal. You're on your own. And that's why people can accumulate more stuff and be more miserable at the same time. So watch this. If your financial life is going up and your spiritual life is going down, you greedy. If you're more concerned, if we're more concerned, and we must be concerned with the responsibilities of time, but if that concern is boxing out God and the priorities of God in your time, your talent, and your treasures, then you've missed it. You've missed it, and this guy missed it, and God calls him a fool. So the question here today is, are there any fools in the house? So what God wants you to do with your life, while he wants you to plan for the future, the Bible tells us that it says, I want you to live for today. But he says, I want you to live for today like it could be your last, because it could be. Okay, so God, what's your point? What you want? What do you want us to get out of this from an eternal perspective? He tells you in his closing verse, verse 21, so is the man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. There it is. He says, here's my point. He's talking to the man who wants Jesus to arbitrate between him and his brother. He says, you want to be rich for you, and there is no divine consideration in anything you are planning. You are planning this independently of God, because I want to get to the root. The more aware you are of your mortality, the more you live with different priorities. What God is saying to you and me is, keep eternity in your face so that you can live a life in history. Don't say, next year I'm going to serve you, God. Next year I'm going to give you some time. And it's all about you, all about now, all about me, myself, I. It's all about that, God. I can't worry about any of that other stuff. I'll do that later. When later may never come. Jesus is saying, mister, don't be a fool. Don't be a fool. Yes, plan. Yes, maximize what God gives you, but not at the expense of God. At whatever level God gives it. You know, he uses a word here. So is the man who stores up treasure. I wonder how many folks here have storages. That's stuff that can't fit in your house no more. That stuff you want to hold on to, and we want to hold on to, we don't even know we're going to use it. We don't even know we're going to ever use it, but just in case, I might want to use it years from now. I ain't gonna help nobody else with it because I might need it, even though I don't need it. I could need it, and therefore I'll pay money to store it and forget that it's even there. Storing. Storing with no purpose in mind other than to store it. I remember the Lexus commercial. Some years ago when Lexus came out, it was the new fancy car on the block, and they had the commercial with a dummy behind the wheel. A dummy. It was a dummy behind the wheel. Good-looking dummy, just a good-looking, well-dressed dummy behind the wheel. Dummy behind the wheel and driving the Lexus car, and the car crashes. They wanted to show off the Lexus and how safe it was. You got a dummy in a car that crashed. We got dummies in life looking good crashing because they are fools. I like you sit down and you watch TV and they got commercials about medicines designed to make you better. To heal your sickness, to heal your hurts and your pains. And they advertise these medicines because they are there to give you a better life, to help you feel better. But then comes the warning. Some commercials spend more time on the warning than the description of the benefit of the medicine. There is one commercial that says this medication will help you sleep. Beware, it may give you suicide thoughts. Duh. What? Another medicine. This will heal you, but it could kill you. This world offers you medicine. The medicine of prosperity, the medicine of notoriety, the medicine of security, the medicine of prosperity. It offers you the medicine, but what this world does not do is give you the warning. Our job is to give you the warning that if you take the medicine of greed without the warning of danger, this medicine called affluenza can kill you. So don't leave God out if you want to have life and not just want to exist. Because a person's life does not consist of the things that he or she has. Far too many people have settled for fake riches. They've settled for things that money can buy, and they've lost out on things that money can't buy. As you've heard today, if you're not rich toward God, it really doesn't really matter how much money you have, what's in your CD or your 401 or in your bank account, stocks, bonds. That has its place. There's a place for that. But what good is having a bunch of riches in time and to stand before God totally impoverished because you did not have a life that had eternal value attached to it? So what we've tried to do today is to refocus all of our attention on the eternal perspective of wealth. Because when you have that perspective, you can enjoy better the temporal provision of wealth. So don't be like our friend who in this passage didn't get to enjoy what he thought he would enjoy because the clock ran out. None of us knows when that clock's going to run out. When it does, make sure you forwarded more ahead, a lot more than you've left behind.
In 2017, you walked with Joseph on his detours to his destiny. You learned how to develop and mature your kingdom family. You experienced the unique person of Jesus Christ, all through the powerful teaching of Tony Evans. You can relive that power or experience it for the first time with the Best of Tony Evans 2017 CD collection, available now.